What life was like in Germany in 1936, before everything changed. My name is Anna. I was born in 1922 in Dresden, Germany. By the time I was 14, Adolf Hitler was already Chancellor of the Reich, and even though I was just a girl, I could feel the world around me shifting in ways even adults couldn't explain. We lived in a small apartment above my father's bakery. It was a modest place, with wooden floors that creaked at every step and a small coal stove that my mother would light at dawn while humming songs from her childhood. My older brother, Otto, would wake me up every morning by throwing a pillow at me before running downstairs for a piece of warm bread. My routine was always the same: breakfast with black bread and a bit of lard, then a walk to school in my neatly pressed uniform. Mother always said that even if we were poor, dignity started with clean clothes. On the way, I passed by the butcher shop, which offered fewer and fewer choices with each passing week. Once I asked why there was no more meat, and the butcher simply said, "Don't ask too much, little one." In 1936, the city felt strange, a mixture of pride, hope, and fear. That was the year of the Berlin Olympic Games. I remember the radio going on and on about how perfect everything was, about the new Germany rising from the shadows of the Weimar Republic. At school, Miss Schneider made us sing patriotic hymns and memorize Hitler's speeches. "One nation, one people, one leader," read the poster hanging above the blackboard. The Olympics were a dazzling distraction. Everyone talked about the country's success, about the new stadiums, about how impressed the world was with us. But what struck me more was a photograph I saw in an old newspaper of a black athlete winning a race. His name was Jesse Owens. He won 4 gold medals. Miss Schneider told us not to talk about it, that it was enemy propaganda. But my father cut the photo out and placed it inside his Bible. I never knew why. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. I had a friend, Ruth. Her family was Jewish. One day, without explanation, she stopped coming to class. Miss Schneider wouldn't talk about it. "Best not to ask questions," she said. That's when I started noticing how adults lowered their voices at the dinner table, how neighbors no longer greeted each other the same way, and children like me learned to pretend not to see certain things. The Hitler Youth became mandatory for my brother, Otto. He came home from training in a crisp uniform, chest puffed out, repeating phrases that didn't sound like his own. He spoke of honor, of fatherland, of racial purity. Sometimes he looked at me strangely, as if he suspected I wasn't thinking the way I was supposed to. Mother smiled at him, but one night I heard her crying alone in the kitchen. One afternoon, Otto showed me how to do the Nazi salute. He taught it like it was a game. I did it, not really understanding what it meant. He got serious. "Do it with pride, or don't do it at all," he said. That scared me. Otto had never spoken to me like that before. Father, on the other hand, never spoke of politics. He said that as long as the bread sold and the oven stayed hot, there was nothing to worry about. But one night, I saw him hide a book by Marx in the ceiling rafters. He never mentioned it again. Later I understood. It wasn't just fear. He knew that one wrong word could mean a visit from the party men. On the streets, propaganda posters grew like ivy, smiling faces, blonde children, braided mothers, heroic soldiers. Everything looked tidy, clean, full of promise. But if you looked closely, you'd see the empty Jewish shops, the graffiti, the averted gazes. Something was brewing, and it wasn't bread. One October afternoon, coming back from the market, I saw men with red armbands removing furniture from the Rothschilds' home, a family who lived nearby. The mother screamed while holding her baby. No one stepped in. No one even looked. I didn't either. I was 14. I just lowered my gaze and walked faster. That night I asked my mother why they did that to them. She stroked my hair and told me something I didn't understand until years later. Sometimes, Anna, surviving means staying silent. On Sundays, we still went to church. The priest preached about loving thy neighbor, but outside stood a man taking notes. Who came, who they spoke with. Some stopped going out of fear, others out of conviction, and some, like us, continued out of habit, out of faith, or maybe out of the illusion of normalcy. I remember a conversation between Mother and our downstairs neighbor. They thought we were asleep, but I listened from the stairs. They spoke of a young woman arrested for handing out pamphlets at the university. Her name was Sophie Scholl. They said she was brave. Mother cried afterwards. We children played war in the courtyards. We used branches for rifles, leaves for grenades. We cheered when the German army won and got scolded if anyone pretended to be the enemy. No one wanted to be the Russian or the French. We were taught they were inferior, dirty, traitors. But I silently wondered if French children played the same way, with branches and leaves, dreaming of being heroes. I remember one especially cold winter night. The stove wasn't working well, and Father hadn't sold enough bread that week. Mother pulled out an old blanket, and the three of us huddled together. Otto was at a Hitler youth camp. As we tried to sleep, she told us a story from her childhood about the First World War and how her father never came back. She said, "War takes something from everyone, even before it begins." And she was right. 1936 was the last year the world felt normal, or at least looked that way. On the streets, people raised their arms in salute, but avoided meeting your eyes. The radios played all day, but no one really listened. And children like me grew up learning to fear silence just as much as noise. Over time, I began to keep a diary, not because I wanted to remember, but because I needed to understand. My words were timid at first, as if they too feared being discovered, but they grew clearer with the days. I wrote about Ruth, about Otto, about Mother, about the butcher, about the letter I never sent, and the fear I never voiced. Now when I close my eyes and return to that apartment above the bakery, I no longer hear Otto's streps or my mother's humming. I hear the radio, the echo of marching boots, and the words of a letter I wrote to Ruth but never mailed. I hope we meet again, even if not in this Germany. And every time history repeats itself, because it always does, I wonder if someone, somewhere, is quietly telling their version too, hoping, this time, someone is listening.